All right, guys, so we're at the top of the hour here, so we can go ahead and get started here in just a quick minute. We'll give some people some extra time to funnel in through, but having said that, welcome, guys, to the second session in a series of sessions that we have prepared for you on Tableau. Last week, we covered desktop, and we'll get into that here in a couple of minutes with the introductions, but I just want to formally welcome you guys to today's webinar here. So we'll get started here, give it another extra 5 minutes, let people funnel through, and then we can absolutely jump right into Tableau Prep. So it looks like we have a couple of people funneling in. Welcome, welcome. We'll get started here in just another couple minutes. We'll start promptly give it about 12:04, 12:05, let everybody join, and then we can jump right into the fantastic content we have prepared for you guys. Cool. So it looks like we're getting a couple of more people sort of trickling in here. So we'll go ahead and get started in just another couple minutes at 12:05. A minute. Looks like most of us have joined. So I did want to welcome you guys to the second part in our series of Tableau webinars hosted, of course, by Data Meaning. We'll jump right into introductions here at 12:05 exactly. And then we can absolutely get into that wonderful content that you all joined us for. Cool. So as promised, 12:05. So we can absolutely jump right into things here. So welcome, guys. I want to formally thank you guys for joining us today. Hope you guys are staying safe in light of all the crazy things that are happening in the world right now. So I want to absolutely thank you guys for joining us and taking time out to view our wonderful webinar series. So having said that, because this is the second part in our series of webinars, I'm not going to spend too much time on the introduction side of things. Hopefully you guys were able to join us last time, but we'll try to get you to that Tableau Prep content as quickly as possible. So really quickly, just a little bit about me. So my name is Andrew. I'm actually a professional services consultant / trainer here on the Data Meaning Enablement team. I personally specialize on really that best practices side of things. So one, not training, I'm actually on client sites working with clients virtually, et cetera, on standardization, really standardizing those practices, making sure that they align with those best practices, making sure that everything's optimized and efficient. I also specialize and focus on automation and what I really like to stake my experience on, which is the design and visualization side. So while we do, and I personally do work with a bunch of different tools, I really did start out on that data visualization components of the overall analytic workflow here. So the design / visualization side of things is where I sort of really like to stake my claim on. But having said that, I'm on the solutions implementation side of things. So all that really means is going onto client sites, really understanding the problems that you're currently facing, really identifying what those problems are if they don't currently exist or have been identified, and really seeking to provide a solution there, regardless of whether or not it's on the visualization side or the ETL or what have you. And as I mentioned before, I also train individuals, public, as well as private trainings here. Now, I am certified on Tableau Desktop. So previously last week, we took a look at an overview of Tableau Desktop. And I'm also certified in Tableau Prep, as well as certified officially by Tableau to teach those courses. So if you go onto the Tableau website and you look for any of the paid courses, chances are I very well could be one of those instructors attached to there. Having said that, I've worked with Tableau for about 6 to 7+ years. So I have a good amount of experience on that front, and the specific industries that I personally am most familiar with is on the hospitality side of things, the financial, supply chain / retail, as well as I do some heavy work with the public sector, so working with government units. I also do, now that I'm noticing, have my email here as well as my LinkedIn. So at any point, feel free to shoot me an email if you have any questions, or shoot me a message on LinkedIn. Love hearing from you guys. Questions are probably my favorite part of these training / webinar series. So absolutely feel free to reach out. I'd love to hear from you guys as we move forward, even past this webinar here. But having said that, we can absolutely jump right into the agenda for today. Want to keep that introduction short and sweet here. But having said that, we do have our webinar schedule. So want to take a really quick overview of what's to come and what we've already taken a look at. We're going to take a look at the lesson plan. And then right after that, we're just going to jump right into the prep demo. Once we've completed the prep demo, we're going to have a Q&A session depending on how much time we have at the end. But regardless of that Q&A session at the very end, if you guys do have any questions as they come up during the webinar itself, if you guys want to see something again, feel free to use the included Zoom chat. So you'll find that somewhere in the user interface inside of Zoom. Or if you want to get a more defined and specific answer, you could absolutely use the question and answer feature in Zoom as well. You can send anonymous questions and the other attendees will only be able to see answered questions only at that point. So you'll get that that level of being anonymous on that front. But having said that, we can absolutely take a look at our webinar schedule here. So last week, we did take a look at Tableau Desktop. So a really, really high level overview of Tableau Desktop, really taking a look at the user interface, some really high level key use cases that you may want to think about utilizing the visualization component of the Tableau platform, and then taking a look at how we could start to build out some visuals here. Moving into this week, we have our introduction to Tableau Prep. So really taking a look at ways we can prepare our data true to the name of the software prior to loading into Tableau Desktop or prior to utilizing it in some other tool here. So we'll be covering, and we'll get into this a bit later, but really data wrangling. So cleaning up your data, combining data, outputting your data, automating that, et cetera, et cetera. We'll touch on all of those various key topics here. Having said that, next week we are going to be taking a look at an introduction to Tableau Server. That'll be more of a deep dive sort of series here on the functionality. So really, how can you set up Tableau Server? How can you manage it? And we'll touch on very briefly some of the advanced configuration topics there as well. Moving on to week 4 and week 5, we're going to have our deep dive inside of Tableau Desktop for our calculations on week 4. So if you guys are making some really intense calculations and you really want to gain some clarity on how to actually build these calculations or how they sort of work and how the Tableau engine works, absolutely, that would be a fantastic session to join. And then on week 5, to end this sort of first initial series here, we're going to be taking a look at visualizations, sort of my favorite, right? Absolutely taking a look at all of the fantastic visuals that your the sales account executive that's probably attached to your account probably showed you to advertise Tableau, really making sure that we understand how the visualization component works and how that engine works. We're going to go ahead and take a look on week 5. Cool. So for the lesson plan for today, sort of a very loose lesson plan here, we're going to be taking a look at initially the UI of Tableau Prep. So if you've literally never seen Tableau Prep before, no worries, we have you covered. So we'll be taking a look at all of the terminology, all of the interface components, just so that if you've never seen Tableau Prep before, you'll be able to follow along and be able to start to get that terminology into your mind there. So we are going to be using, taking a look right next to the UI overview, the sample Superstore data sets, as well as the sample Superstore flow. So we're actually going to be creating the flow that comes pre-packaged with Tableau Prep. So that way you guys have that flow on your own machines if you want to follow along, as well as it'll give you an idea of what Tableau Prep can do. Now, having said that, sort of building off of that component here, that topic, this session is going to be highly interactive, so I highly encourage you guys to follow along using your own copy of Tableau Prep. If you guys don't have a copy, no worries. This session is going to be recorded, and we'll send this out through, I believe it's on LinkedIn initially, and then we'll post it onto YouTube. So if you guys have any concerns on that front, we have you covered. But having said that, you guys can also download a free 14-day trial on Tableau Prep if you guys do want to follow along It may take like 5 to 10 minutes for setup though. Having said that, the last component, or the second to last component that I do want to mention before, really just jumping right into things, is going to be that best practices component. Really do want to make sure that we focus very heavily on the best practices because with Tableau Desktop, there's honestly a wealth of content already out there. So if you Google something on Tableau Desktop, you'll get like 15 different answers saying the same exact thing, right? There's a general consensus there, but because Tableau Prep is relatively new, I would say within the last 2 to 3 years, they're just, because of that time component, not going to be that much content. So really want to focus on making sure that you guys have that understanding of what to do and what not to do, and various scenarios and how to handle them. But last thing I do want to mention just really quickly, so on the topic list of what we're going to cover here today, depending on the timing here, we're going to first initially take a look at how we can actually connect to data, right? You can't start to wrangle data if we have no data to wrangle. So we'll connect to data. We'll go ahead and cover some of the data cleansing components here. We'll absolutely cover ways that we can combine our data sets together using the joins and unions features and functionality. And then we'll finally take a look at ways we can aggregate our data to sort of streamline and optimize our data sets. And then finally, we'll take a look at how we can output our data and the various options we have related to that. So automation, really utilizing the server component, as well as the various data sources that we can use to output to. But having said that, I'll go ahead and really just jump right into things here. So if you guys are following along in Tableau Prep, we'll jump right into that workflow here in just a couple of minutes. But having said that, if you guys do want to follow along with me, I do have a separate instance of Tableau Prep open here. This is what you guys are going to be looking at whenever you open up Tableau Prep for the first time. Depending on whether or not you guys have a trial, this will say trial expires in however many days. But having said that, we do absolutely have our connections pane. So really quickly breaking down what exactly we're looking at here, this initial landing page, right? At the very far left-hand side here, we have our connections pane. Now this connections pane, true to its name, is going to allow us to set up any connections to really, I would say almost any data set that you have. If it's a really specific data set that's only related to your specific use case, not many people are utilizing it, you may need to work through some extra steps to set up an ODBC connection there. But having said that, in general, any data set that you use will be found inside of this connections pane. So if you go ahead and click on that plus icon, and notice that we do have a whole host of not only various files here, so Microsoft Access, PDFs, Excel, et cetera, and most recently, Tableau extracts. So we can absolutely actually read in Tableau extracts. But we do have, if we take a look at the very bottom here, or right below that, our server-based data sources. So we have, for example, Amazon Redshift is one of those big ones. We have even Dropbox and Google Drive. But a bit more traditionally, we also have our, see if I can find it, MySQL, Oracle, Microsoft SQL Server. So regardless of what data set you're really using here, you'll be covered. And of course, as mentioned before, if you guys don't necessarily have a data sets that's server-based that you don't see here, you can absolutely set up a connection to a database through a JDBC or ODBC connector there. But having said that, we'll go ahead and zoom out. So again, this is going to be the connect pane, what we just looked at here on the far left-hand side of our screen. And of course, we do have the ability to click on this plus icon, which we'll see here in just a couple minutes on setting up a data source. Now, if you open up your Tableau Prep and it doesn't necessarily open up with this view with the connections pane already in focus, you'll most likely see something like this. So the easiest way here in order to get that into the view is to simply left click this arrow, this side caret, and that will absolutely expand that out here. Now, in the middle here, we'll have our recent flows. So I do have that workflow that we just saw opened up. So sort of like how PowerPoint, how Microsoft Word, Excel, et cetera, allows you to get back to those most recently used objects or documents or worksheets here. Tableau Prep absolutely does give us that option here as well. And we can connect to our data using that blue connected data option as well here. Now, at the very bottom here, I want to briefly mention that there are going to be a bunch of sample flows that you can find here. So I only have 2 downloaded at the current moment, or I should say there are 2 out of the box that come preloaded with Tableau Prep. So if you guys are working off of your own versions of Tableau Prep, you absolutely will see these flows. First initial one, which is what we're going to be covering today, is the sample Superstore flow. But we also do have the world indicators flow here as well. And if you guys do actually look on Tableau or do a quick Google, you'll be able to find other sample flows that you can download off the internet that may be a bit more use case specific, just like Tableau Desktop. Now, on the far right here, blazing along here, we do have our Discover pane. So I sort of like to call this the training / social / resources pane, because it doesn't just give you content on Tableau Prep, but it does give you your training. So after this webinar, if you guys do want to expand your Tableau knowledge, really pursue that higher level Tableau Prep knowledge, you can do so utilizing the online help resources, the documentation, as well as various videos that are tailored to those individuals who are just starting out with Tableau Prep. Now, at the very bottom here, we do also absolutely have some resources. Now, these are going to be outside of Tableau official content. You will find official content here, but this is going to be more so geared towards the sort of social aspect of Tableau. So we'll see the forums links, we'll see Tableau conference, we'll see a lot of blogs that are written either by Tableau employees or by other individuals in the Tableau community. So definitely be able to see that here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and take a brief pause here and just really point out that the flow that we're going to be taking a look at today is going to be the sample Superstore flow. So if you guys are following along at home, please feel free to open that flow up here now. If you guys don't have Tableau Prep installed, no worries, we got you covered. But if you do want to follow along, absolutely highly recommend it. Cool. So let that marinate for a bit. Open up the other instance of Tableau Prep that I have here. And once you guys open up your sample Superstore flow, we're going to be brought to this screen over here. Now, this screen, fantastic. This is going to be where we're essentially going to be living in for the duration of this session here, this webinar. Now, in the middle, most, I would say, apparent or what's most in focus here is going to be our flow pane. So if I were to highlight this out here, right, this flow pane, I should say, I can speak here, is going to be where we actually get to define all of the individual steps here that we'll be adding into the pane here, the flow pane, I should say. Now, I did specifically use key terminology here, and I do want you guys to sort of start to embed that into your minds, really planting those seeds here. I do want to, I call them jargony terms or jargony terminology in my classes. Absolutely, if you guys do want to Google anything, it's really important to make sure you use the correct words. So flow pane, right? So let me go ahead and type this out here. Flow pane. And then we have our individual steps here. So these are going to be where we can actually start to make changes to our data and actually start to clean up or make any edits here. Having said that, we can absolutely take a look at the top of our user interface. So just like how Tableau Desktop has a menu bar, Tableau Prep has a menu bar, be able to find files. So save as, edits, Control Z, Control V, or Control Z, Control Y for undo and redo. And then we absolutely do have control like for copy and paste. We'll be able to find those in edits. Flow, server, and help will have their own Tableau Prep specific settings. And then we also have, we'll get back into this later, but our data pane as we saw before, and then our undo and redo steps here as well. Now, I'll touch on this very briefly, but this is going to be the cylinder icon with the sort of pause icon built into it is going to allow us to pause any updates to our workflow as we're starting to build it out. So if you guys are familiar with Tableau Desktop, that'll allow us to make a lot of changes at once without having Tableau Prep always requery our initial source data. We can also manually refresh our data if there were any changes. We can manually run the flow as well. Now, these are all topics we are going to jump back to here. Now, we'll go ahead and I'll leave it at that for right now. Just really quickly explain what the workflow does, and then we'll jump right into how to rebuild it here. So notice that the workflow will, zoomed in a bit too far there. So let's see if I can increase the size here. So as we're going from left to right, we really do just like how we read books, right? We want to read this flow from left to right. So starting initially, essentially what we're doing is we're bringing in all of our disparate data sources. So we are going to be starting off with multiple data sources. We'll be making a bunch of changes to them. So Tableau Prep was so gracious enough to give us some key comments here, some descriptions. So for example, that green step allows us to remove nulls. We're fixing data types, we're renaming states, et cetera, et cetera. And then we do have the ability to, in this case, union all of those data sets. So stacking them up together to create one data set. And then we'll do some nice data manipulation to combine that cleaned up output with another output. In this case, our returns data sets. Now, we'll generally leave it for there. We'll probably end right here for today, but we do have the ability to continue going and create multiple different offshoots of the steps themselves of the flow. So you don't necessarily need to create one output. If you want to have one workflow that has an output of like 15 different data sets, you could absolutely do that. I personally wouldn't recommend it from a best practices standpoint, but having said that, Tableau Prep does give you that option. So we'll go ahead and leave it at there for right now. And then as we start to see newer instances or new topics arise in the user interface, we'll just call them out as we see them. So I'll go ahead and move this screen all the way over here. And we can go ahead and just jump right into things. There are going to be a couple of data sets that come preloaded on Tableau Prep. I'm going to go ahead and just open them up here on the screen, just give you a really high level idea of what to do. So if you guys are starting off fresh, I highly recommend clicking on either this blue connected data icon, or as we saw earlier, zooming in here, right? Either this connections icon or that blue connected data. So I'll go ahead and click there. Doesn't matter where you go. Anyways, it's going to get, so absolutely, it'll open up the same exact pane here. So I'll go ahead and select Microsoft Excel. So for those of us who are working on Excel or CSV, we'll be living in that land predominantly. But once you have the data loaded into Tableau Prep is going to be data agnostic. All of the functionality you're about to see is going to be able to be used on, I would say, most, if not all, data sources here. So clicking on text file, let's go ahead. I'm going to move over to my desktop. Where is my, should have cleaned my Tableau Prep here. Let's see. Where is my Tableau Prep? There we go. Wrong desktop. So data, I'll go ahead and for now, let's actually focus on order south. So notice that once I've added that into my view, that I absolutely do get to see a preview of my data sets in terms of all of the different metadata options available to us. So breaking this down really quickly, at the very bottom here, what actually just opened up was the profile pane, as well as the data grid. In this case, this is going to be our input sort of settings / profile pane. Allows us to make a bunch of changes here prior to loading in the data. If you guys don't necessarily see it right off the bat, I would say clicking on this drop down caret, or this caret right here, would absolutely allow you to get that there. Now, because I included a there we go. Because I included a CSV, I do have CSV specific options. So I have my field separator, I have my text qualifiers and character sets, locale, et cetera, my various text options. So If you want Tableau Prep to attempt to generate your field names automatically, you absolutely can. But in this case, the first line will contain my header value. So I'll leave it as is. And I do have the ability, let's say if I've added in the incorrect data set, I notice that once I've loaded it in, it's not the right one. You can absolutely change it by clicking on the edit icon. Cool. Now I'll go ahead and actually navigate over to where I saved that, that folder, just to give you an idea of the environment that we're working with. So the Tableau Prep data sets that we have here for you guys, predominantly going to be looking at the orders data set. We might take a look at the quota if we have time today, or rather, sorry, the returns data sets. But having said that, we take a really close look at the orders south. Notice that we've actually separated this up by years. We see this quite frequently with organizations that have sort of this structured system of saving physical files onto their system. Usually it's separated in some manner rather than having one historical data set contain millions upon millions of records across all years, right? We'll generally see that separated by like fiscal quarters, months, et cetera, et cetera. In this case, it's gonna be years. But having said that, notice that I only added in 2015. So instead of having to drag in multiple connections here, so instead of having to click on that plus icon, text file, 2016, moving down the line, we can actually just tell Tableau Prep to include multiple files. Now, we can absolutely click on wildcard union as well. So if you guys want to have a more programmatic access to your data sets, this is going to be your method. And this is actually going to be the method that I'm going to use here as well. So I would say that because we have a bunch of files here, notice that we are including the orders central, orders west data sets. Don't necessarily want to include those quite yet because we do need to make some changes there. I'm going to go ahead and include a matching pattern here. So I'm going to go ahead and type in orders underscore south. And then I'm going to include the asterisk, which will include or tell Tableau that we're going to be looking for the pattern. So any file that starts off with orders underscore south, we're going to include that. Anything after the asterisk, it doesn't really matter. So those years values, we're just going to include all of those year values regardless. So go ahead and hit my enter here and notice that Tableau Prep has absolutely reduced the amount of included files here. So a fantastic feature, very useful. I use this quite frequently when working with these file systems. Having said that, I'll go ahead and hit apply here. Let Tableau Prep sort of run through these changes, and then we can absolutely move on here. Now, if you do want to make some very light changes here, you absolutely can. So I would recommend clicking on the Changes tab inside of your input pane in order to be able to recognize all of your various changes that you're making. So for example, if I wanted to change row ID, if I noticed that it was being brought in as a number, but I wanted to change this to a string, I absolutely can. And notice that Tableau Prep will identify that here in the Changes pane. Now, if I did want to get rid of that, I could absolutely hit Control Z, or you can click on that X icon, and that will get removed. That will remove or get rid of that change here. Cool. We do also really want to quickly call out, have the ability to filter our values. Now, because this step does include multiple files, we are not only just including orders underscore south underscore 2015, we are including all of those multiple years. I'm actually going to go ahead and rename this by, I'll do that one more time, right-clicking that step side of the view, selecting rename, and absolutely typing in orders, parentheses, south, or any other naming convention that you would like to include there. Now, if I go ahead and also right-click again to add a description, we'll be able to, right underneath, type in, for example, something that's intuitive for our end users. So something to the effect of this data input step includes multiple years. So if you do want to document your workflows as you're going through these things, nothing drives me more nuts than having to look through documentation like those 100+ pages of PDFs just to find one piece of information. So as you guys are working through and documenting this out, really helps to spread that tribal knowledge, really helps to maintain that level of manageability and reduce that overhead when making changes here. Having said that, I'm going to absolutely move on to add an additional connection here. So for example, going to Microsoft Excel, let's see what we have. We have orders east. I'm going to go ahead and click on that, select to open, making sure that that's included here. And we do have the ability to add that in. Just like before, like I said, Tableau Prep is data agnostic, so you're going to generally see the same functionality within each step, regardless of which data source you're using. Now, because we are using Excel versus CSV, which we initially added in, we'll see a couple of different options initially, but that's okay, because after this step inside of the flow, we'll be able to interact with it just the same. Cool. So moving on, we do have the ability to go to our orders west here. So I'll go ahead and include that moving along, just really quickly trundling along here. Oh, that was the central. That is okay. Text file, orders west. Add that in here as well. Now notice this is sort of a new feature that we've been asking for quite some time, users of Tableau Prep, which is the ability to move around these individual steps to wherever you want. So if you wanted to include your orders east and drag it all the way to the right, you absolutely have the ability to do so. But we do want to include this in a logical order. So I'll go ahead and start to work through those best practices, really using what I preach here. So orders east, rename, orders west, and then lastly, but not least, orders central. Oh, remember my parentheses. Central. Awesome. So I'll go ahead and drag these up just so that they're a bit more defined. Oh, this Tableau Prep won't let me do that because of these annotations here, but that's all right. We'll leave it as is for right now. Taking a really quick look at the West data sets though, this is why it's really important to profile your data before loading it in, because we do absolutely see that we unfortunately have multiple fields that we may not want to include. So maybe perhaps we had a process prior to this that loaded in or created the West data sets through some kind of join here, maybe perhaps an Alteryx, some other ETL tool, or on the server side. So I just want to go ahead and remove these fields here. So really going through and just deselecting these values here. Going through, trundling along here. All right. So that will allow us to remove these fields. We can see all of those fields were removed here as well. Cool. All right. So having said that, we'll go ahead and move on to our next set of functionality. One last thing, do want to mention, if you guys are working with an exorbitant amount of data, it's really intense, it's taking Tableau Prep to like way too long to input that data, you can actually bring in a sample of your data set, really get the functionality all built out, and then remove that data sample so that you can have that flow run through. But having said that, we can go ahead and actually get into the data cleaning steps here. So in order to add an additional step here, very simple. All you need to do, click on that plus icon. So that plus icon will start to be bolded if you are hovering over it. So that is going to be the icon we want to select here. And the step that we want to add in this case is going to be a clean step. So clicking on that clean step here, notice that will automatically bring up our data pane, our profile pane and data grid. So taking a very close look here at the very bottom, notice we have the ability to take a really high level look of our data set here. And we can absolutely select multiple values if we do want to copy and paste, et cetera, et cetera. But more importantly, we have the ability to clean up these values. So for example, if we take a look at in our profile pane, scrolling over to order ID here, right? Let's say that this order south, for whatever reason, had a bunch of different nulls. We absolutely can click on the 3 dots here. So I'll zoom in here so that you guys at home can see this a bit easier. So zooming into the 3 dots for order ID, going to filter and selecting null values. We can absolutely select the values to keep. So we want to keep non-null values here. So we'll go ahead and select that and hit done here for now. So zooming out, that will allow us to really filter our data, really only bring in the data that we want. And as we go ahead and make these changes, this is going to become a bit more apparent here in just a couple of minutes. But clicking on the side arrow here, the side caret inside of our profile pane, inside of our clean step here, we can absolutely see all of these changes here. So we can also highlight that change and really bring it up into focus. So if I was working on something else, for example, all the way over in quantity, clicking on that icon here will automatically bring that focus into the view, really bring that step into view. So as mentioned before, I am going to rename this to removing order ID nulls, just so that we can see that as a step here. Maybe I do want to perhaps reduce the text here. So that may be another best practice here, really being able to see the full name itself. And if you do need to expand on the description, absolutely adding a description there will be something we can do. Now, moving on, I'll go ahead and take a look at the orders East data set. So clicking on the clean step here, I'll go ahead and let's see here. So if we go ahead and really quickly profile our sales field, it does look like, unfortunately, it's A being brought in as a text value. So ABCs, notice that the UI and the icons are quite similar to Tableau Desktop. So you're going to be able to transfer that knowledge over. It's going to be sort of like a Tableau Prep and Tableau Desktop analog here. It's going to be very close. But unfortunately, if we take a look at the data itself, right, we get that USD, something that might be really effective in Excel, but unfortunately, if we're uploading this or we're building this data set with the intent of including it into Tableau Desktop, of course, Tableau Desktop would not be able to use any numeric functions on this data. So let's actually go ahead and see if we can't fix this. So in most cases, for example, if you were utilizing Excel or what have you in order to get rid of these USD values, you might do something with like a combination of the length of the text, some kind of right function, maybe a left in there. But in this case, I don't actually need to do that. I do have that ability to do so by creating a calculated field and cleaning it up that way. However, if I go ahead and zoom in here, clicking on those 3 dots again, notice that I could just simply remove all of the punctuation, letters, numbers, if I wanted to, making it very easy and very quick for me. So I don't actually have to figure out that calculation. So clicking on remove letters absolutely will change that. And notice at the very top here, we also do have a couple of recommendations as well. We'll get back to that here in just a second. Ooh, I mean to undo that here. But going back to the sales, the last step that I do want to mention is, of course, changing this over from a string to absolutely a decimal here. So we can start to think of this in terms of numeric functions as well as numbers in general. So moving on to orders west, moving along here, clean step, adding that in here as well. Let's take a look at the various states we have included here. So really quickly at a very high level here, where's my states field? It's a very good question. So at the very end here, you did notice I may have had some trouble actually finding that field. So if you guys did want to have a more condensed view, you can either just show the data grid or just show the list view. One method is going to be more effective of actually showing your changes. The other is going to be more effective in really viewing that metadata, really viewing all of the columns you have. So I'll go ahead and click on states. In this case, I do want to actually show the changes here because we take a look, we may have a couple of states here that we may want to clean up here as well. So taking a look, we do have AZ, CO, ID. Now, if we had a couple of states here that's unfortunately were misspelled, we absolutely do have the ability to automatically group these values. So let's say that I'm not necessarily capturing all of the cleaned up values. You absolutely can manually group these values. You can group them through pronunciation. So we're looking at the various algorithms that Tableau is going to run these text values through, common characters, as well as the spelling here. Cool. So actually, I believe here, let's see, for my right states, let's see, here, we may have an example of what that would look like. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at what that looks like. So we do have our fully spelled out values here as well. Having said that, we can go ahead and click on the dropdown. If I know I wanted this field before, but I don't necessarily want it anymore, absolutely can click on remove here. That will get rid of that field from the view here. Let's see. And we do have our recommendations as well. Cool. All right. So having said that, I'll go ahead and just really quickly, just in case, group and replace these values. So let's just say through spelling, say that we may want to initially find the states that may be spelled the same. So in this case, right, we have a couple of changes here. Maybe we don't want to include these members inside this grouping, right? We can absolutely adjust the strength of the algorithm itself. So how Tableau is actually going to group these values up together. But having said that, we'll go ahead and uncheck that. We'll actually go ahead and ungroup these so we can see all those values here. Cool. So moving on to orders central, let's go ahead and take a look at the changes here. We're actually almost really close to getting to the state where we can actually start to include all of these into one data stream. So cleaning up this step here as well. Yeah, actually go ahead and move back, rename this to, let's see here. What did we do here? We fixed our data types here. So fixed data types, clean 2. We renamed states. And then clean 3. This is where we're actually going to get into just an all-around general cleaning. So gen clean. We'll go ahead and name that for right now. And then we can go ahead and take a look at what we're doing in this step. So in this case, I'm actually going to go ahead and start us off by creating a calculated field here. So clicking on that first icon at the very top of our profile pane, right? That'll allow us to create a calculated field just like in Tableau. I would say in general, most of the functions are going to be available except perhaps some table functions or table calculations if you've used desktop before. And we do absolutely also have some aggregate functions as well. But we'll go ahead and focus on, in this case, we're going to add in a field called region. So whereas before we had that region field already included, we're absolutely going to have to include that here as just a standard field. So clicking on save, we have our region field central included. Moving through here, we'll go ahead and I'm going to do some changes here. So some cheating, if you will. So I'll go ahead and create a field called order dates. So if we go ahead and do a quick scan, it doesn't look like we have an order date field. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this here, but I will absolutely just highlight the fact that Tableau Prep, just like Tableau's calculation editor, you can absolutely rearrange these functions just like the regular editor here. So if I wanted to, I could include as many spaces, enters, new lines, tabs if I wanted to. So essentially what we're doing to break this down, putting this all in one parentheses, we're taking a string of our order day, converting our order month to a string, converting our order year to a string, and we're essentially separating those with the separators of a slash here. So if I go ahead and hit save, notice that Tableau will absolutely include those order dates here as well. Now, the neat thing about this changes pane really quickly is that we can absolutely see what this sort of looks like as we're starting to build this out. So not only can we see the lineage of our changes looking at the steps, but we can see the lineage of our changes within these steps themselves. So notice if I click on the region central, the calculated field order date isn't automatically included, but once I go ahead and click on that, we do absolutely get to see that here as well. Now I'll go ahead and switch this data type over to a date as we saw before. Beautiful. We'll do the same exact thing for our ship date here as well. So typing in ship date, including that in here. Hitting save, we'll absolutely have that added in, and we'll of course just change this date over as well. Now, if I go ahead, we'll go ahead and leave it as is for right now. One thing that I do want to change here is going to be, we no longer need these various fields here. So the order year all the way to ship day. So we'll go ahead and remove those here, switching over to that metadata view. As I mentioned before, we'll go ahead and remove these fields from the view. Now what we'll notice is we're actually gonna see some issues here, but that's completely fine. We are anticipating these issues, so we'll absolutely cover them as we move through these values here. We'll go ahead and do a quick high-level profile view just to make sure that everything is as it should be. Cool. And taking a look at our values here. Excellent. All right. Now, there are going to be instances where you won't necessarily have everything changed prior to, this sort of Avengers style team of all of your data sets, really combining them together. So it's really important to always profile your data as you're working through even those initial steps, as it is going to be important to capture those as early as possible. But having said that, because we've cleaned up all of these various worksheets here, these various data streams, we're going to go ahead and now union them. And we can absolutely click and drag these flows here. Let's go ahead and input this here. So we do have our inputs here. Let's see if I can union this here. Prep is not, let's see here. There we go. So dragging it to the add location here. So going ahead and going through, and as I'm dragging and dropping these steps here, making sure that I drag and drop it to the left-hand side of our of that step here. We'll go ahead and last but not least, add these here as well. All right. So one thing I do actually want to capture here is that I do want to make sure. All right, so we're good to go here. Now time to absolutely take a look at our unions here because essentially what we're doing is we're vertically stacking our values such that we're now able to see this in one whole data stream. However, notice, unfortunately, we have a couple of mismatched fields. So in this case, we have file paths. File paths is something that's initially only is included in the, I would say, in this case, our orders south data set. So what I'll go ahead and do here is going over to file paths. I'll just go ahead and remove this from the view because it's just going to show us the data set name. That's completely fine. However, notice that discounts and discounts, because they are named differently, Tableau's going to take those name values in absolutes because there's that addition of an S. Even though we understand that discount is equal to discounts, we should absolutely make these changes. And we do see the product name does have a mismatch as well. Now, just simply renaming these values is not going to be enough. The reason being is if we take a close look here, our discounts field is going to be in a text field, and our discounts without an S is going to be a numeric field. So the easiest course of action here is going to find the initial source data stream that we got our product and discounts field from, and absolutely change it there so that we don't need to finagle with it in some other step down the line. So clicking on the initial step here with our discounts. So going over to our metadata view, I'm going to go ahead and first initially rename this field to discounts. And clicking on the product, or the field type rather, and making sure that this is going to be a decimal value here as well. Now we did need to make a change to our product name, so I'll go ahead and make sure that we capture that here as well. So renaming that to product space name. Making sure that if we go ahead and now view our union results, right, sort of sticking in that metadata view, that everything is aligned as it should be. So that's beautiful. I won't make any changes there. So I'll go ahead and actually drag this union away here as well. Now we do have that step included. I do want to make sure that we have the ability to get to that join, because that is going to be the last thing that we are going to sort of take a look at here today. So we'll go ahead and actually take a look at what happens when we actually join up our values here. So I'll go ahead and include a new connection. So taking a look at returns with our, I believe it was a text file. Let's see if I guessed right. Nope, it was an Excel file. So clicking on Excel, return reasons, absolutely, we'll go ahead and add that in. We'll drag that here into our view. So we'll go ahead and make some really light changes here. It's nothing we haven't necessarily seen before. So initially, we'll go ahead and fix our, going over to the profile view, our notes field. So we do have a notes field here. So what I'll go ahead and do here is include a calculated field, notes dash splits 1. Go ahead and rename it correctly. And we'll go ahead and split up our notes value with a delimiter of that dash here. We're going to be bringing back that first instance and trimming any unnecessary spaces. So clicking on save. You can see our notes dash 1 does have our split here. And we go ahead and go further, go down the line and start to split up these values as well. So notes dash splits 2, copying that in. Notice the only change here is to bring back the second instance. On save, absolutely. We'll go ahead and move on here as well. Now, the only thing that I'm gonna really change here after that, or after the fact, is going to be to rename the approver field. So notes dash split 2, we're gonna say that this is gonna be approver. We can go ahead and continue on from there. Now, in order to join up a field very similar to the union step, however, the only difference here is going to be to select join. Now, notice that because this join does require multiple inputs, Tableau is going to give us an error here. It's going to give us an alert. That is fantastic, because Tableau will give us a longer description of what's actually being shown here. But having said that, I'll go ahead and just simply add this here. We can absolutely start to configure this join clause up. So we'll go ahead and select here product ID with product ID, making sure that that's included. Then absolutely, we'll go ahead and select order ID with order ID. Now, of course, this view is going to be very different than the views that we've seen before, because we are using a clean step. But at the end of the day, we are going to be still utilizing that sample flow that we've seen before. It does give us a summary of various values that we can include that are excluded as well as the join result, the resulting values that we wanted. Now, if you guys are familiar with, for example, SQL, right, we can absolutely change the join type. So if we wanted to write outer join, manually selecting that part of the Venn diagram will absolutely allow us to capture those here as well. Now, in the essence of time, we can absolutely go ahead and output this flow here. So a bit of a abbreviated version of our workflow that we saw before. And we can absolutely output this to, for example, renaming this, let's say, sample flow. And we can browse this here on our desktop. So go ahead and click on accept. We can absolutely output it as a hyperfile, a TDE, or a CSV. In this case, I'll go ahead and write it out to a hyperfile, and we can absolutely run this flow here, have Tableau run through all those changes, clicking on done. And if I go ahead and minimize here, we should be able to see that flow. So let's see if I can find that on the desktop here. Let's actually go to the desktop. Let's see. Output. That may be in the other desktop here. No worries. There we go. So there is our output extract. So bit of a crunch there at the end, but at the end of the day, we are looking at everything that we've seen inside of the Tableau workflow, the Tableau Prep flow. That should get you guys with all the information you need to actually run through that flow. So having said that, I'll go ahead and stay on the line for just a couple of minutes here, just to answer any questions that you guys might have, but do want to really quickly, briefly mention that we also do have some fantastic resources to reach out to us. So of course, I showed you guys the extra resources for Tableau Prep earlier. And we do have a couple of resources if you guys do want to reach out to us directly. So of course, sending me emails. I try to respond to you guys as quickly as possible, same day. And then we also have my LinkedIn here, datameeting.com if you want to drop us a line, as well as Data Meeting on YouTube if you want to see any recordings of the sessions. And of course, please do join us next week for our Tableau server webinar here. But having said that, I'll go ahead and open up the floor to you guys. I know running up at the top of the hour here, so don't want to keep you guys any longer here, but absolutely feel free to ask any questions. Go ahead and run it till 1:05 here for any questions that you might have. Cool. Cool, so it doesn't look like we have too many questions here. So let me go ahead and double check chats. Yep, so it looks like we are all good on the questions for now. And now if you guys weren't able to get any of your questions captured by any of our wonderful panelists here, absolutely feel free to shoot me out an email. Love to hear from you guys as you guys are working through Tableau Prep. If you guys have any questions on the webinar itself, anything we covered, or in Tableau in general, absolutely, we'll go ahead and get you squared away here for now. But I will go ahead and end the webinar here. Running a bit past 1 o'clock, so I do apologize for that, but I just wanted to thank you guys for joining us this week. It's fantastic having you here, and we'll absolutely see you guys next week for our server training. So I hope you guys have a fantastic, wonderful rest of your day. And with that, we'll go ahead and end today's session here.